So this morning we'll be starting a new 4-week series, thinking about how the Bible is communicating a big story that helps us to consider what is life all about. The Bible isn't just a bunch of random little interesting stories, nor is it just a collection of sayings that we need to get into us. It's the grand story of life, of God's unfolding plan to save the world. It's the big story that we're all invited into. It's a story that can help us to understand ourselves better. And the lens that we'll use to help us look at this will be that of created, fallen, redeemed, and restored. This morning, I'll help us to unpack this idea of being created. In 2 weeks' time, then, Stephen will be looking at what does it mean to be fallen. After that, I'll help us to consider what does it mean to be redeemed. And then finally, Stephen will finish off this series by thinking about what does it mean for humanity to be restored? And through this, the hope is that we will have a framework that will help us to think about what's the Bible saying when it comes to that question, what does it mean to be human? And it'll be something that moves us to consider our purpose. It explains to us our problem. It reveals to us God's promise. And it gives to us a certain hope for peace. That's where we're going. That's what we're thinking about. That's what the next few weeks look like. And so this morning we begin with created. Most weeks I head to a pub quiz with my brother, and when I'm there I often find myself in the minority in a couple of areas of life. Firstly, I have children, and I'd say I'm one of the few people who go to this quiz that has kids, and that sets me apart just a little bit. But what really sets me apart is that I'm a Christian, and I'm not just a Christian who goes to church, but I'm one who works at a church. And when it comes to this area of life, I would be confident in saying that I am really set apart because I'm probably the only person there who would regularly darken the door of the church. And so because of this, because I have children, and because I go to church, when it comes to questions that are either about Disney or religion, it's all eyes on me for the answer. And I tell you what, that is pressure. Because if I get a question wrong, particularly when it comes to religion, I get some amount of stick. But I also get stick simply just for watching Disney movies. The assumption is that if you didn't have children, then why on earth would you bother watching those movies? But now, having seen my fair share of these movies, I would actually be an advocate for watching them because when they get it right, not only are the films fantastic, but they also have an ability to reveal what are some of the current societal issues or concerns or questions that people are wrestling with. And they have a knack for being able to use story to communicate something that's interesting and profound and even challenging when it comes to life. A great example of this comes from what is probably one of the best Disney films, and one that I'm sure many of you will have seen, and that's Toy Story. Amid toys coming to life, adventures unfolding, and silliness happening all over the place, there's a thread of questions that continually surface for Buzz Lightyear. Who am I? What is my purpose and place in life? Do people even like me? Do I fit in? Do I even matter? The question that rears its head time and again in many different ways is this: am I significant? And here, within a silly but brilliant cartoon, do we have something that cuts right to the core, not just of what society might be grappling with at a particular moment, but of what humanity has been grappling with for all time. We've all wrestled with this question, haven't we? It's not just me. We have all in some way and to some degree thought about these things. I'm sure we've all found ourselves getting up in the morning with a heavy sigh, looking in the mirror and asking ourselves this. And it's not just that we've wondered, am I significant? We all want to be significant. We all want to be valued. We all want to be important to someone else. If we hadn't been able to make it to church this morning, we'd want people to notice. We'd want to be missed. And it's not so we could feed our pride or fuel our ego. It's because we want to know deep down at the core of our being that we really do matter, that we truly have value, that we're important to other people. And so if this is true, if we really do carry with us this burden of wanting to know the answer to that question, am I significant? then what are some of the possible answers that we might get in response to this? Well, when we think about what it means to be human and we consider this question of significance, I think there are three possible answers that we might come across. And the first answer to this is this. It's that you're not significant, so you need to just get over yourself and get on with your life. In the beginning there was a swirling chaos, and from this ancient sea, the waters divided into two. The fresh water became the god Apsu, and the salt water became the goddess Tiamat, who over time came together in union. And when they mixed, the younger gods came from them, who over time became troublesome annoyances, disturbing the peace of their father Apsu. And he was troubled by this, and so chose to destroy his children, but he failed and was killed himself. Enraged by the death of her husband, in vengeance, Tiamat took on the fight for herself. And in response to this, her children were afraid and searched for a champion, one powerful enough to be able to defeat their mother. They chose the mighty Marduk, who rose to the challenge, defeating Tiamat and her army. And it was from her broken body that the world was made. One half of her became the heavens, the other half became the earth, and the blood of her defeated army was where humanity was born, not into freedom, but into servitude, viewed as nothing more than lowly, disgusting slaves, created to do for the gods what they were far too lazy to do for themselves. And so goes a brief retelling of the Babylonian creation story known as the Enuma Elish. This is an origin story and a claim about what it means to be human, and it's one that would have been well known and swirling around culturally at the time of the Old Testament. It's not, however, an origin story that swirls around us now, but one that does and has an impact on how we might view life and what it means to be human is the modern materialistic view of life. While the ancient Babylonians would have said that in the beginning there were some nasty gods, the modern materialistic view on life says that in the beginning there was nothing. The universe, yes, has a starting point, and of course all things have come into existence. Life is here before us now, but before anything, before the something, there was absolutely nothing. The modern materialistic view, when taken down to its logical conclusion, leaves us with the sense that we've come from nothing, life is a nonsense, and ultimately we're going nowhere. And Richard Dawkins famously summed this up when he said that at the bottom of the universe, there is no design, there's no purpose, there's no evil, there's no good, there's nothing but a blind, pitiless indifference. If this is true, then everything really is meaningless. Nothing really matters. And so all we can do is just get on with life, enjoy the hand that we've been dealt. And I'm sure that many people who would consider themselves the materialists would say that they don't agree with Dawkins. And they'd argue that actually they have plenty of meaning in their lives, and that's true. People can find and feel meaning in all sorts of places, but a meaning that exists outside of ourselves, something that goes above and beyond just our own personal preferences and feelings, is something that materialism struggles to account for. And it can't fully account for the desire or the fact that we all seem to live our life in such a way that looks like we're striving for meaning and significance. It's one of the questions that we have. It's one of the things that we strive for in life, and we can't ignore that. Both of these accounts, the Babylonian ancient origin story and the modern materialistic view on life, while they're very, very different, in some ways they're actually quite similar, because both describe an accidental, indifferent, empty, meaningless, purposeless take on human existence. And when it comes to that question that humanity wrestles with, am I significant? It implies that we're not. And while we have an answer provided here for us to our question, one of the big problems with this answer that's provided is that the question still remains. That hunger for significance still exists, and we all practically live out our lives thirsting after significance. And so maybe another answer would work better. If the first answer is to say you're not significant, so you just need to get over yourself and get on with your life, the second answer is to say that you could be significant if only you would do something about it. This is Madonna, and she was probably the most famous person in the 90s. Now, I know for a fact there are a group of people in church right now thinking, who? Just think of Taylor Swift. Just think of how famous she is. Madonna was just as famous, she was just as successful, she was just as popular, and she achieved all of that without social media. When it came to having success as an actress, a musician, a model, a businesswoman, Madonna seemed to have it all, and she achieved great things. And yet, with all of that in mind, she once in an interview said this: "My drive in life comes from a fear of being mediocre. That is always pushing me. And I'll push past one spell of it and discover myself as a special human being. But then I feel I'm still mediocre and uninteresting unless I do something else, because even though I have become somebody, I still have to prove that I am somebody. My struggle has never ended, and I guess it never will." I think it's amazing to think that someone who had become and achieved so much in her life was a person who struggled deeply to believe that she was someone who was significant. And while it would be utterly impossible to try and connect with Madonna's life, I think in some ways we can all connect with what she feels here, that I could be significant if only I would just do something about it. In their book, Being Human, Peter Linus and Joe Frost tease out this idea of achieving significance. And they say that culturally, at the moment, we have two storylines that we all often buy into when it comes to trying to source significance. The first of those storylines is to try and earn it. The storyline says that your significance is dependent upon what you will achieve. If only you could get that job, pass the exam. If only you could buy that house and go on that holiday. If only you could meet the standard, create that family, get rid of all those wrinkles and secure that big bank balance, then you'll have made it. You'll have your significance. And in the eyes of everyone else who's looking at you, you'll gain their approval. It's a significance that's built upon what it is that you do and how it is that other people will see you. The second storyline then is to try and be it. Here, our significance comes within. It doesn't matter what you all think of me. It only matters what I think of myself or how I choose to define myself. And rather than me turning to others, I'm only going to look to myself, because ultimately I'm the hero. And the significance that I have and that I feel in my life, this is generated from within, and it comes only from me. To a world and a people who are hungering and thirsting after significance, these are the two storylines that sit around us. And I wonder which one of those, when you look at it, do you naturally gravitate to yourself? I'm sure we've all felt their pull in our lives, and as we all, in our own quest for significance, I'm sure we've all either tried to earn that or to be it. And to our big question, am I significant? This is another answer, but then there are problems with this answer as well. And one of the problems is that this answer is a weighty, heavy load to carry. The pressure that we could put on ourselves to either earn it or be it is immense, it's huge. And what happens when we don't pass that test? What happens when we don't get the job or have the family? Where are we left then? And if, like Madonna, what happens if we do get it all, but then we end up realizing that it's all not enough, or that we're not enough? What do you do with that? And what happens if we look within ourselves for the answer, for the hero, and we realize, I just don't have what it takes? Or what if when we look deep into ourselves, what we realize is that we really don't like what it is that we see? What do we do then? With all of this, with the storyline being that when it comes to our significance, that we either have to earn that or be it, what we can be left with is, yes, an answer to the question, but one that's a heavy, cumbersome load that I think in the end would crush us. When it comes to that big question, am I significant? These are two of the possible answers that we might come across. Firstly, you're not significant, just get over yourself. Or secondly, you could be significant if only you would just do something about it. There is, however, a third answer to this, and it's that you are significant because of me. And to think about this answer, we need to go to the Bible, which to the idea that at the base of all things there is nothing, or to the idea that having significance falls solely on our own shoulder. The Bible is telling a different story. It says that at the bottom, in the beginning of all things, is a God of love and relationship who delights in relationship and extends that outwards. And when it comes to humanity, it's not that life is meaningless or meant to be achieved for ourselves. Rather, it's that because there is a God of love at the base of all things, that life can be full of meaning and that humanity is a figure who is full of significance. And we begin to get an understanding of all of this in Genesis. Now, it's important to state from the off here what the book of Genesis is not trying to do. Genesis is not trying to provide for us a textbook that is unpacking the scientific coming together of the universe. Genesis does not really seem to be answering or concerned with the how questions. It seems to be a story that's more concerned with the who and the why questions. It's not detailed scientific mechanisms that are unfolding. Instead, through this text, we're being opened up to consider meaning, significance, and purpose. And in relation to humanity, we get to consider this in Genesis chapter 1, verses 26 to 28. This is what it says. Then God said, "Let us make mankind in our image and in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, over the livestock and all the wild animals, over all the creatures that move along the ground." So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female, he created them. God blessed them and said to them, "Be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it, rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, and over every living creature that moves on the ground." Here we are reading about such an incredibly high view of what it means to be human. What we're being told is that there is something utterly special and unique about humanity, even compared to the rest of what God has made. God looks at creation and he says, "It's good." But then he looks at humanity and he says, "That's very good." If there was such a thing as the Northern Irish translation of the Bible, it would put it like this: all that God was made was good, but then he looked at humanity and said, "You're a cracker. You're something else." Because we have been created, yes, humanity is, in one sense, like everything else, but we must never forget that we are uniquely created. We have been made in the image of God, and because of this, humanity is set apart. Humanity is different. Humanity is something else. And this phrase that sets us apart, that we are made in the image of God, is key, and it's important to grasp. And it's something that reveals that at the base of who we are as humans, that there are at least two abilities that we all have. And that's that we have the ability to be representational and the ability to be relational. Firstly, as humans made in the image of God, we can be representational. For much of my teenage years, something that I constantly heard from the people who knew my family was that I was the spitting image of my dad. From them, the way I looked, the way I walked, the way I talked, even the way I just stood on the spot reminded them of him. I'm sure there are many people in this room who've been told something like that in their life. Now, in that instance, it wasn't that I was actually my dad. Instead, it was that in some ways I bore his resemblance. When people were looking at me, by looking at me, they were able to see something of him. I was in some ways his representative, reminding people of him. Linus and Frost in the Being Human book unpack this idea by saying that an object that represents another image isn't actually the image. It's not a clone or a repeat, but rather it's a representation, a reflection. It's a signpost that points back to the original true image. The interesting thing when it came to my dad was that there were things that I physically had to do that would then allow people to be reminded of him. But here, what we're seeing in Genesis is that before humanity even does a thing, they have something. There's something about them. Regardless of their gender, their class, their status, their stature, their ability, before we even get to thinking about what it is that they're going to do, at their base, we're being told that humanity, each and every one of us, because we've been made in the image of God, has the honor and the gift of being able to be his representative. We are able to mirror something of God to the world around us. That's staggering. The second aspect of being made in the image of God then is that we have the ability to be relational. And there's three aspects to this. Firstly, we have the ability to and the privilege of being able to know and have a relationship with God. Again, you go back to the time of the Old Testament. At this time in history, the thought was that humanity had zero connection with God, that they were the scum, the forgotten slaves made to suffer, toil, and work under the gods. But here we have humanity walking with God in the garden. We see that God communicates with them, and he gladly shares his blessing and speaks words of purpose over them. Here there's a clear picture being given to us of humanity being able to enter into and enjoy a relationship with God. That's the first thing. The second thing then is that there's a relationship with each other. It was not good for Adam to be alone. When Eve is made, we get this sense that in some ways she rescues him. She completes him. Without her by his side and him by hers, humanity is in some ways deficient. And this quality of being made to have a relationship with each other is something that reflects something of who God is. If God is love, if he's three in one, if he's Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, then he is community. And if it's community that we've been made by, then it's community that we've been made for. Humanity being made in the image of God means to enjoy community with him, but also to enjoy community with each other. We're not made for isolation or to be on our own. And finally, we're not just made for relationship with God or for with each other, but also with the world around us. What we see in Genesis is that creation is not something for us to exploit or oppress or destroy. Instead, a key component of what it means to be human and to live into our God-given humanity is that we're to rule and subdue, that we're to enjoy and to look after the world around us. To be gifted with the ability to represent and the ability to relate, this is part of what it means to be made in the image of God. And the ability to have these things provides something to us. That ability to be a representative of God provides us with deep and meaningful honor that should just absolutely blow our minds. And the chance to be able to relate to God and to each other and to the world around us, I think that's something that provides for us the best opportunity of being able to flourish and experience life in all its fullness. This is what the big story has to say to us. To be created, to be made in the image of God, says that humanity is not just a group of incidental, unloved slaves of the gods. Humanity is not just meant to turn inward on itself and mistake itself as God. And it says that humanity is not just a meaningless or purposeless accident that has somehow come together and just needs to make the best of where it is. Instead, the mind-blowingly amazing, jaw-dropping claim being made here is that humanity has been intentionally created in the image of God. And that because of that, every single one of us, no matter who we are, has been endowed and gifted with a dignity and a worth that could never be earned and never be taken away from us. Back to Toy Story. You know, for Buzz, all throughout the movie, he grapples with his identity and his purpose and his meaning. He's someone in the movie who's well and truly wrestled with and struggled with this question, am I significant? And you know, it's only when he comes to realize that he bears the mark of his owner and that he has something of his name written on him that he begins to see a way forward and he realizes that he truly is significant. The Bible's claim fights against the idea that in life nothing matters. And it fights against the idea that the only thing that does matter in life is what you do and what you achieve. And instead it tells us that at our core, before we do anything, no matter who we are, what we have, no matter how able or unable we may be, that because we've been made in the image of God, that we all of us bear something of his mark. That as humans, we all have written on us something of God. And because of this, you matter. Because you have been made in his image and you bear his mark, you are significant. And this is something that we should never forget. This is the opening lens of the big story of the Bible. Creation is that starting point. And as it opens with a good God who creates a good world full of good people who are made for good relationships and able to enter into good things. It begins with beauty, and through it we are reminded that our meaning and our purpose and our significance in life is not something for us to achieve. Instead, that's a gift for all of us to receive. Let's just pray. Lord, we just thank you for your love for us. We thank you for the worth and the value and the significance and the dignity that we have in you. Lord, help us to remember that. Help us to know it. Help us to, in times where we might be tempted to think life is meaningless and what's the point and nothing really matters. Or when we might be tempted to believe that we need to achieve and earn or be our significance. Help us to be able to fight against that and to recognize that deep at our core, who we are before we've even done or said or achieved anything is people who are made in your image and seen as significant by you. Lord, help us to never forget that. Help us to hold that tightly. And help us as we live with other people to remember that they too are significant and full of value and worth. And help us to be able to treat them in a way that recognizes that. Thank you for your word. Thank you for your big story. Thank you for how it communicates and speaks to us in our life, where we're at and what we're going through. And we just pray that as we leave this place and as we go into the rest of our week, that something of that would stick, that it would land in our lives, and it would point us in your direction. In Jesus' name, amen.